Israel's deadline for hostage release has expired, with Ramadan now beginning. Will it carry out its threatened ground offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah? Also tonight, the Pope's controversial message to Ukraine over the war with Russia. What did he mean when he said raise the white flag? A special report from the Torres Strait calls for the border force to crack down on illegal activities on an island near PNG.
And Maria, I see Oppenheimer.
7 Oscars for Oppenheimer, but the Academy passes on a history-making opportunity for Best Actress. I'm Janice Petersen. This is SBS World News. Good evening. Ramadan is beginning, and long-held hopes of reaching a truce between Israel and Hamas in time have now been abandoned. But mediators are still working to secure a new deal. Egypt says it's been in touch with both sides to restart talks in the hopes of securing another ceasefire and hostage release before the month ends.
The holiest month of the Islamic calendar, beginning in unholy conditions. Thousands of families displaced, but determined to mark Ramadan.
احنا مش موجودين في بيوتنا، موجودين في الخيام، لكن أصرينا إنه نزين لرمضان ونحتفل فيه سفرة متعددة الأصناف. السنة الله أعلم يعني إذا أوجدنا الأكل، في ناس كمان كثير هتكون صايمة ومش هتلاقي أكل تفطر عليه.
A month of fasting threatening to become a month of famine.
في شيء لا في تمر ولا في ألبان زي الخليج ولا شيء عالي، الواحد مش قادر يشتري لأولاده.
Jordan's Air Force ramping up aid deliveries by air to Gaza's north. Every parachute sighting sending a crowd of hundreds rushing towards it. More substantial deliveries by sea were expected to start on the weekend, but the first ship, loaded with 200 tons of food, is still docked in Cyprus. Israel's defence minister watching closely.
התהליך הזה מיועד על מנת להביא סיוע ישירות לתושבים ובכך להמשיך במיטוט שלטון החמאס בעזה.
The IDF says it killed 30, quote, terrorists in the past day. But in Gaza's north, it was the bodies of civilians being pulled from the rubble. The Palestinian Civil Defence says all 10 members of one family were killed in an Israeli airstrike. Hopes of reaching a truce in time for Ramadan in ruins. Hamas says Israel wouldn't commit to a permanent ceasefire or guarantee the rights of displaced Palestinians to return to their homes.
بمعنى أنه يريد أسرى ويريد استرداد أسرى ويستأنف الحرب على شعبنا وعلى قطاعنا.
Families of hostages protesting another failed attempt to secure their release, this time outside the US Embassy in Tel Aviv, after US President Joe Biden accused Benjamin Netanyahu of hurting Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister hit back.
Well, I don't know exactly what the president meant. The attempt to say that my policies are my private policies that are not supported by most Israelis is false. The vast majority are united as never before, and they understand what's good for Israel.
In Biden, we trust.
These families hoping the US can still convince him to change course. Claudia Farhat, SBS World News.
Ukraine has strongly rejected a call by Pope Francis for Kyiv to negotiate an end to the war with Russia and to have what the pontiff called the courage to raise the white flag. The Pope also suggested that Ukraine appeared to be facing defeat and shouldn't be ashamed to negotiate peace. The Vatican has been quick to try to clarify what the Pope's words meant, but the reaction from Ukraine has been equally swift.
La resa, la bandiera bianca in questo caso.
The interview was recorded last month and partially released yesterday by the Swiss broadcaster RSI.
Ma credo che è più forte quello che vede la situazione, pensa al popolo e ha il coraggio della bandiera bianca e negoziare.
The pontiff said that before Ukraine's president rejected Turkey's offer of mediation in peace talks with Russia. The Vatican later stressing the Pope was speaking of stopping the fighting through negotiation and not capitulation. But there was also the Pope's apparent suggestion of admitting defeat.
Quando tu vedi che sei sconfitto, che la cosa non va, avere il coraggio di negoziare. Ti vergogna, ma te su, continui così, quanti morti e poi?
Ukraine's president responded by highlighting the interfaith spirit of resistance to Russian aggression, dismissing the Pope's comments as virtual mediation.
І розмовою, і справою. Ось що таке церква з людьми. А не за 2,5 тисячі кілометрів десь там займатися віртуальним посередництвом між тим, хто хоче жити, і тим, хто хоче тебе знищити.
Ukraine's foreign minister posted that his country will, quote, never raise any other flags than the country's blue and yellow colours. He also made what is being seen as a reference to the Church's failure to stand against Nazi Germany in World War II. When it comes to the white flag, we know the Vatican's strategy from the first half of the 20th century. I urge to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past and to support Ukraine and its people in their just struggle for their lives. Polish Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski appeared to accuse the Pope of staying silent on Russia's crimes as the aggressor, posing this question: how about for balance, encouraging Putin to have the courage to withdraw his army from Ukraine? Peace would immediately ensue without the need for negotiations. Instead, in the Russian-controlled Donetsk region of Ukraine, polling stations have opened. People here are voting early to confirm Vladimir Putin as their president. Gary Cox, SBS World News.
The US military has carried out a nighttime operation to airlift non-essential staff from its embassy in Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince. The situation on the ground is becoming increasingly violent as armed gangs attempt to topple the government.
Tonight, with Haiti on the verge of collapse, the U.S. military evacuating non-essential embassy personnel overnight, choppering in Marines to reinforce the embassy. The State Department urging Americans to leave as gangs launched coordinated attacks across the country against the presidential palace and the Interior Ministry, multiple police stations set on fire, gang soldiers showing off stolen flak jackets. The government now extending a state of emergency, and Caribbean leaders calling an emergency meeting Monday for what they call a, quote, dire situation. And tonight, ABC News speaking to the man behind it all, gang leader Jimmy Cherissier, known as Barbecue. He says the first step in the fight is to overthrow Ariel Henry, and then we start the real fight against the corrupt oligarchs and politicians. The unelected U.S.-backed Henry took charge when President Jovenel Moïse was assassinated 2.5 years ago. Poverty, violence, and hunger soaring on his watch, now even the U.S. pressuring him to step aside. Barbecue is Haiti's most notorious gang leader, a former police officer responsible for an explosion of violence. Even if Henry steps down, it's not clear who takes over or when new elections would take place. In the meantime, hospitals closed. Thousands of criminals have been freed, access to food or clean water increasingly scarce. Ordinary Haitians, innocent people, suffering.
Matt Rivers with that report. Portugal's centre-right party, the Democratic Alliance, has claimed victory following Sunday's snap election. The alliance, led by Luis Montenegro, secured 77 of the 230 seats in the National Assembly, falling short of an outright majority. The opposing Socialist Party, who have held office for the past 8 years, has conceded defeat. There was a surge in support for the far-right Chega Party, but Mr Montenegro is refusing to negotiate with them to form a government. There have been protests outside a Holocaust museum in Amsterdam. Activists calling for a ceasefire as Israel's President Isaac Herzog arrived for the museum's opening. A Dutch Jewish anti-Zionist organisation which organised the protest with the local Palestinian community said that while it honoured the memory of Holocaust victims, it could not stand by while the war in Gaza continues. In a speech, the President stressed the need to fight hatred and anti-Semitism. that he said were flourishing worldwide. 3/4 of the Netherlands' Jewish population of around 140,000 people were killed by the Nazis during the Second World War. Well, hope for a pause in fighting during Ramadan has been dashed after Sudan's army ruled out a truce with the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Fighting between the country's army, the Sudanese Armed Forces and the RSF has plagued the country for 11 months after the rival forces fell out over a plan for transition to civilian rule last April. Since then, around 14,000 people have been killed and more than 8 million people displaced. The UN has warned that Sudan could be facing the world's biggest hunger crisis.
The city of Omdurman now proudly reclaimed by the Sudanese armed forces. The army boasting its presence in the former presidential palace they seized back from the Rapid Support Forces at the weekend. This gain they haven't had since the war began last April.
تم تحرير منزل أول رئيس سوداني منزل الراحل زعيم الأسهري. نحن الآن متواجدين داخل المنزل بتاريخ اليوم 9/3/2024 والمنزل الحمد لله تحت سيطرة القوات المسلحة السودانية.
From burnt ambulance stations to local shops, the country's second most populous city now scarred by fighting.
بصورة عامة الدمار كبير يعني محتاج مننا لمجهود كبير عشان الناس تتضافر والناس تساعد بعض. اخواننا ذاتهم الموجودين في المناطق دي يجوا يقفوا على بيوتهم ان شاء الله ويحاول نرجع الخدمات ان شاء الله باذن الله.
There's no sign of return though, many fleeing to neighbouring countries, South Sudan and Chad. And in the shadow of Ramadan, the UN says 25 million people, half of Sudan's population, are starving. Last Friday, the UN Security Council backed a resolution calling for a ceasefire during the holy month, a resolution the RSF also backed. But today, confirmation from the army in a telegram statement that no peace is possible until the paramilitary leaves civilian sites and homes. The army now going further, saying RSF leader Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo cannot play a future in Sudan's politics or military. Both sides have found support from countries in Africa and the Middle East. The US Special Envoy to Sudan will start a tour of both regions today to garner support for an end to the war. Rayanne Tamer, SBS World News.
Well, back home now, and a heat wave hitting the southeast of the country has stretched into a third day. Temperatures have tipped over the mid-30s across South Australia and Victoria. While the warm conditions saw some major events called off, others have gone ahead, with patrons doing what they can to keep cool.
Fun in the sun at the Moomba Festival. Carnival goers braving the heat of a third straight scorcher in Melbourne as temperatures soar once again.
Whoa!
The streak of hot weather felt most intensely across Victoria and South Australia as faces flush in especially warm autumn conditions.
The weather's crazy, man.
In the shade, it's not that hot. You know what I mean? If you're in the sun, you melt.
The extreme heat saw the Moomba Festival's iconic parade called off.
Standing here in the heat at about 10:30, we're already at 30 degrees. I know that we've made the right call.
As well as Victoria's popular Pitch Music Festival. But in Adelaide, the marquee event of the city's Adelaide Cup public holiday went ahead, despite temperatures hitting almost 38 degrees, to the concern of some animal rights activists. But the Southeast Australian heatwave didn't stop those eager to soak up the excitement on show on a long weekend for many.
We thought that probably we'll come early morning and it'll be less hot, but no, it's pretty hot now.
Struggling, but the icy poles do a good job.
A swim at the beach, another way Melburnians have looked to escape the sweltering temperatures, many choosing to lap up the warm conditions before a cool change begins to sweep through from tomorrow.
And it's not until Thursday that we see a stronger southerly surge that will be able to truly flush out all the heat from inland parts.
Until then, some choosing the sea breeze while others found shelter and a sweet treat to keep cool. doing all they can to enjoy a day of summer-like weather before they run out. Tom Stainer, SBS World News.
Coming up, growing pressure on Australia's northern border. The remote communities who say they're living in fear. Also, import tariffs on more than 500 items to be axed. What difference will it make to household budgets? And a proposal to end a free one-way toll across the Harbour Bridge. Torres Strait Islanders say drug use, illegal fishing and people smuggling between Australia and Papua New Guinea are increasing. In the wake of a spate of criminal activity, they're calling on governments to bolster frontline services. Sabai Island is just 4 kilometres from the Papua New Guinea mainland, and residents say it's becoming a flashpoint for border incursions. Some witnesses have asked to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation.
Sabai Island residents say these camps are illegal and the people who live here are from PNG. In January, a traumatising event unfolded when they confronted the visitors.
Pretty much attacked with machetes and spears and yeah, we were in fear for our safety and basically our life as well.
Residents say these unwanted arrivals are illegally fishing in their waters and it's having an impact.
We have a high number of Papuans literally exploiting our island.
Residents are concerned about the increase in the drug trade, theft and people smuggling. They say poverty in PNG is part of the problem.
You can understand and appreciate why people are coming across to Australia, come to Torres Strait, obviously because the grass is greener on our side. And one can't blame them because if it's for food, for your children and for your families and that, then you would do anything to do that.
Meanwhile, a $13 million high-tech security post on Sabai that was built in 2020 remains largely unmanned. NITV understands there are just 2 Torres Strait Islander liaison officers based in the facility, but they don't have the power to make arrests, carry a weapon or confiscate illegal items.
For years we've said to our enforcement agencies is that give us the proper compliance powers for our men and women who are frontline.
A spokesperson for Border Force says the facility is used during patrols, which occur several times a year. Border Force says it maintains a strong presence in the region, including maritime, air and land surveillance. But Torres Strait Islanders say it's not working.
We know it's happening, but there is very little that we can do to make something of it. I mean, if our agencies are understaffed, then for heaven's sake, we need to do something about giving them the proper manpower to be able to carry out those duties.
Warnings that our northern borders are under growing pressure.
NITV reporter Carly Willis with that report. US President Joe Biden could be losing the support of black voters in the swing state of Georgia. 4 years ago, he won the state by a slim margin. Now Democrats fear the community is turning away from the party.
Victory here in November could turn on just how many African Americans decide to vote.
Are you going to vote this upcoming election?
Wasn't looking at doing it.
Was it? Okay.
It's an attitude voting advocates are trying to combat, and they're finding frustration with the Democrats on the doorstep.
The Republicans, they can say one thing and people will catch on to it, and it sticks. And so I want us to have more one-liners. I do want more aggression.
And why is that?
88% of black voters supported Joe Biden in 2020, but some surveys show that as many as 1 in 4 could now back Donald Trump, with the cost of living a big factor. With 8 months to go until the election, this race is going to be a long one, and few seem excited about the Trump-Biden rematch.
A lot of people in my community kind of feel like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Biden is a good president. He's not a great president. And a lot of us are concerned about his age.
The Biden campaign has sought to address the age issue head-on. In Georgia, his focus was squarely on voters of colour.
And we're here to say simple thank you, thank you, thank you.
2020 was the first time in more than a quarter of a century that Democrats won the presidential election year. And with more than a third of Georgia's voters coming from the African-American community, Joe Biden knows he needs that support to win and cannot take it for granted.
70 miles up the road, it was a very different-looking crowd for Donald Trump, who's facing 13 criminal charges in the state connected to the last election. His message to black voters was blunt.
Because I did more for black people than any president other than Abraham Lincoln. It's true.
The road to the White House runs through battlegrounds like Georgia, and Joe Biden will take comfort that despite doubts, some African Americans still want to be seen with him.
Gary O'Donoghue reporting there from Georgia. A 12-year-old autistic boy missing for almost 3 days in Sydney's southwest has been found. Hussein Al-Mansouri disappeared from his family's Auburn home on Saturday, sparking frantic search efforts. This afternoon, he was found alive and well in the fire escape of a local medical centre.
One of the staff members thought to check the stairwell, which is exactly what we're asking, and as a result we found him. He was found well, he smiled, he was sitting up. He's been taken to hospital just for a checkup, but on all accounts he's doing well.
Days of torrential rain have left Indonesia's province of West Sumatra inundated. At least 20 people have been reported dead and more than 80,000 people have been forced to evacuate their homes. Rescue teams are continuing to search for survivors.
This is the aftermath of days of torrential rain in Indonesia's West Sumatra. Homes flooded and roads turned into rivers. Emergency services are scrambling to save stranded families. More than 70,000 people have been evacuated.
This is undoubtedly the worst flood in about 5 years. It was extraordinary and unexpected. After decades in this city, this is the first time it has been exceptionally intense.
Damage to roads and bridges are making rescue difficult.
The joint team was expanded in the South Coast area to 14 affected areas. There is a search for 7 people.
Some residents have started to clean their homes, but they are still coming to terms with the cause of the natural disaster.
Thankfully, my motorcycle was saved by putting it on an elevated place. As for the rest, everything in this room was submerged by the current.
With more rains expected in the next few days, people could be forced out of their homes again.
Hamza Mohammed reporting there. Well, the United States Department of Justice has launched a criminal investigation into Boeing. It follows the door plug blowout that left a gaping hole on an Alaska Airlines plane in January.
Tonight, Boeing now the target of a Department of Justice criminal investigation into that terrifying mid-air blowout, according to the Wall Street Journal. A door plug on Boeing 737 MAX 9 ripping off during an Alaska Airlines flight in January, forcing an emergency landing, just narrowly avoiding a potential catastrophe.
You have your name, and we have to make sure it's safe for us to be moving right now.
And tonight, the NTSB wants to know who removed 4 bolts its investigation found were missing from that door plug. 3 shown here in this photo, texted among Boeing employees. The agency demanding Boeing provide any production documents and information on the specific production shifts and the names of the 25 employees at their Washington plant who worked on those bolts, telling a Senate Commerce Committee last week Boeing has yet to comply.
It's absurd that 2 months later, we don't have that.
In this letter to committee chair Senator Maria Cantwell, Boeing says they sent the employee names, but admitting when it comes to the production records, we have looked extensively and have not found any such documentation, adding the documents required by our processes were not created when the door plug was opened. The DOJ was already looking into Boeing, and more specifically, whether the company violated its 2021 deferred prosecution agreement after 2 deadly 737 MAX crashes, requiring the company to cooperate with federal probes. And if the DOJ finds that Boeing is not cooperating in this door plug investigation, they could be prosecuted for conspiracy to defraud the United States.
Morgan Norwood with that report. Well, Hollywood's highest honours have been handed out at the 96th Academy Awards in Los Angeles. Oppenheimer fulfilled predictions to become the night's most decorated film, but expectations of a history-making moment for the first Native American Best Actress nominee were dashed.
Emma Stone.
The night's biggest upset, Emma Stone winning Best Leading Actress for her performance in absurdist comedy Poor Things.
Lily, I share this with you.
The Academy denying Lily Gladstone the chance to become the first Indigenous American to win an Oscar for her role in the Martin Scorsese epic Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oppenheimer.
No surprise was Oppenheimer's clean sweep. 13 nominations and 7 wins, including Best Picture, Director, Leading Actor, Supporting Actor, Cinematography and Original Score. Celebrations for the night's final award preceded by an awkward announcement by Al Pacino.
And my eyes see Oppenheimer. Yes.
A nod to the Barbenheimer rivalry on stage.
And the way this award season's turned out wasn't that much of a rivalry, so just let it go.
Despite Barbie's 9 nominations, the box office darling finished with just 1 trophy for Best Original Song. But the Kennedy of another nominee stole the show.
I'm just kidding, baby, where else I've been.
With a special appearance by Slash from Guns N' Roses. Another musical performance garnered a standing ovation. Osage tribal singers giving a powerful rendition of Wazazi from Killers of the Flower Moon. Outside the ceremony, hundreds gathered to protest against the war in Gaza, and inside, many attendees wore red pins, a symbol of the Artists for Ceasefire movement. Recognition also of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, 20 Days in Mariupol winning Best Documentary Feature for its raw portrayal of the war by Ukrainian Associated Press video journalist Mislav Chernov and his colleagues.
I'm honoured. But probably I will be the first director on this stage who will say, I wish I would never made this film.
And leading the In Memoriam section, a tribute to prominent Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who died in a Russian prison last month. The night, a mix of political statements, glitz and glamour, and the absurd, including a tribute to the 50-year anniversary of an onstage streaker. For the Hollywood Awards season, that's a wrap. Alexandra Jones, SBS World News.
Tariffs on more than 500 household items will be axed from July. The move's intended to drive productivity and also cut red tape for businesses. The government's selling the change as a cost of living measure. The opposition says it'll hardly make a dent for the average Australian.
Embracing a public holiday tradition marking the birthday of the nation's capital. Beautiful. Thank you very much. The Prime Minister's focus on ballooning costs with inflation still high, taking an axe to import tax.
This is the biggest unilateral tariff reform in at least 2 decades.
From July, 5% import tariffs will be slashed on goods from washing machines to sanitary products, toothbrushes, toasters, pens, chopsticks and roller coasters.
I'd love to do more of this if we can build support for it.
Business groups say yes to less red tape and modest savings.
The revenue impact will be about $30 million a year. That's not huge, but more importantly, time is money.
Savings for consumers to be even more modest.
Bamboo chopsticks may be slightly cheaper.
The opposition labelling the Treasurer's claims the policy will ease cost of living pressures hot air.
If he thinks that's material to the average Australian, he is delusional.
Household budgets front of mind in Tasmania too, with the state election looming. The Liberal Party in power for a decade as the PM flew south to lend some Labor heft.
Helping Tasmanians with their cost of living is the #1 priority.
We need a better future for Tasmania. We need a Labor government. Thank you.
Voters in South Sydney will also head to the polls next month to replace former Prime Minister Scott Morrison. The date of the Cook by-election set for April 13. It's almost certain Labor won't contest the safe Liberal seat, though nominations remain open until next week. Sarah Temevska, SBS World News.
As we just heard, the Treasurer is scrapping 500 tariffs on imports, but discussions continue about China's tariffs on some of Australia's exports to the country. SBS Finance Editor Ricardo Gonçalves joins us now with the details. So, Ricardo, has there been any progress?
Well, Janice, China's ambassador to Australia says bilateral ties between the two nations are stabilising after a period of free fall, but stops short of confirming an end to tariffs, as much as 218% applied on Australian wine enforced in 2020 when relations soured. Australia's Trade Minister said earlier that China would complete its review of tariffs by the end of this month, with producers like Treasury Wine Estates ready to return to the market, which was once its biggest. Australia is the world's 5th largest exporter of wine. Xiao Qian told the AFR Business Summit discussions are progressing well.
They are now carrying out those investigations, and things are moving on the right track to the right direction.
Inflation in China, meanwhile, has returned, with increased Lunar New Year spending, sending consumer prices 0.7% higher in February. It's a first rise following 6 consecutive months of decline. To the Australian share market now, which had its worst day in more than a year. But it did follow a week of record highs. The ASX 200 down 1.8% today.
Just run too hard, too fast, put frankly. And the pullback we're seeing today is probably a healthier thing in the longer scheme health of this bull market, which I would describe it as right now. Today, we're seeing the mining stocks, in particular iron ore miners, are getting hit pretty hard. Iron ore futures are down around about 4% in China.
So all 11 sectors finished in the red. BHP lost 2.9%. The banks were down. Regional Express rose, though, as it announced a code-sharing deal with Etihad Airways. And energy stocks like Woodside lost ground. That's as the price of Brent crude declined ahead of reports from OPEC Plus nations and the International Energy Agency later this week. Gold is also a little weaker at just over $2,177 an ounce. The Australian dollar is down against the US ahead of inflation data due out later this week there. It's also weaker against the other major global currencies, including the Japanese yen. That's as its share market fell the most since October 2022. There's growing speculation the Bank of Japan will begin lifting interest rates next week for the first time since 2007. Revised GDP figures today reverses last quarter's 0.1% contraction into a 0.1% expansion, meaning the nation avoided entering a technical recession. Australia's regulators are increasingly worried about the financial position of some borrowers, saying that hardship applications have risen materially over the past 12 months. In its first meeting of the year, the Council of Financial Regulators, which is made up by the corporate regulator ASIC, banking watchdog APRA, the Reserve Bank and Treasury, also added that there has been an increase in the share of households who had fallen behind on loan repayments, albeit from low levels. It's also concerned about the flow-on effects of a slowdown in the global commercial real estate market and encouraged businesses to do more against cyber attacks, which it says are growing in scale and complexity. And an independent review into Australian toll roads has found Sydney motorists will fork out around $195 billion on user-pay roads by 2060, prompting calls for major reform. The interim report concludes that prices are too high, disincentivising the use of the roads and causing further congestion. The report provides a list of recommendations to reform the network, including cheaper per kilometre charges, the establishment of a body with the power to set prices and boost competition, and two-way tolling on the Sydney Harbour Bridge and Tunnel and Eastern Distributor to spread costs across all toll roads.
Yeah, I'm not going to rule in and out every single recommendation that has been put on the table by Dr. Fells and Dr. Cousins, but no one should assume that they'll be implemented in full. We need time to assess what it would do to the toll road network.
Report author Alan Fells also called out private toll road owner Transurban for being a dominant player. The company, which has a stake in 11 of Sydney's 13 pay roads, welcomed the report, saying it's another step in the process of delivering better value and outcomes for customers. Now, the report says there are more toll roads in Sydney, Janice, than any other Australian city.
Thanks so much, Ricardo, for the update. Well, coming up, why video surveillance systems being installed in the nation's meatworks. Plus, why New Zealand's long wait for a test win over Australia will last for years to come. More than 50 victims of Islamist-inspired terror attacks in the UK have signed a joint letter warning against what they describe as anti-Muslim hatred. It comes as the UK government prepares to set out a new definition of what extremism is.
58 signatories who've survived terror attacks by Islamist extremists, lost children, parents or partners. Hamas's attack on Israel, 7/7 in London and many more. They say it's important to distinguish between the extremists and the vast majority of British Muslims who deplore such violence. But warn recently some politicians and others have been facilitating anti-Muslim hate. One of those who signed, who lost his partner Elaine MacGyver in the Manchester Arena attack, is Paul Price.
Everything is to divide and people wanting to choose sides, and that just leads to hatred, people being entrenched in either side. And I thought it was important for someone like me to put an open letter to MPs to say, stop using this inflammatory language.
This weekend, tens of thousands were out in London again. The signatories to the letter say it's important that being Muslim is not equated with being an extremist.
Mr. Anderson.
Lee Anderson was suspended as a Conservative MP last month. Commenting on the marches, he'd said Islamists had got control of London and its mayor, Sadiq Khan. But the government is concerned about extremist elements within such protests who make Jewish communities and others feel unsafe, so it's taking action.
There are some people, sadly, who hold views that are contrary to the values that we hold as a country, and we should not allow those views to percolate through society.
This week, the government will unveil a new definition of what constitutes extremism to highlight groups that threaten democracy. They'll be banned from getting government funding, but civil liberties campaigners say it could be far too broad and backfire.
And essentially, this new definition scoops up a number of community groups and charities that it might not be intending to scoop up.
Ministers say free speech and religious belief will be protected. Labour says it's important extremism is defined and hatred tackled wherever it's found.
Damien Grammaticus reporting there. Australian meatworks certified under the industry's welfare certification scheme will have to install video surveillance systems to ensure safety and welfare standards are upheld. It comes after the Australian Meat Industry Council rejected similar calls by advocacy groups last year. The move has been welcomed by animal rights groups, but they say more needs to be done.
A long-delayed initiative finally coming into fruition.
It's education, it's about training, but it also is about ensuring that our customers are confident in the process that we have in place.
And this has kind of been a progressive decision over lots and lots of conversations, but ultimately we congratulate AMIC on taking the step forward and we look forward to continuing to work with them on how it will be implemented.
Last year, animal activists from the Farm Transparency Project installed secret cameras in abattoirs in Tasmania, exposing the treatment of animals inside the facilities, leading to calls for greater transparency.
None of them are our members, nor are they part of this system. They purely operate under state legislation. We want to see state legislation come up to the bar with us.
I don't think this can be made out to be a matter of a few small bad apples. The volume of the evidence and footage that is being received over the last several years demonstrates that this is a widespread industry problem.
Under the program, meat processors will have to film livestock handling from the moment animals arrive at a facility until the point of slaughter, a move the Meat Industry Council says will give consumers confidence.
This is not a revolution, this is just evolution, our continual evolvement to meet our customers' requirements, because that's the most important thing.
But animal advocacy groups say this isn't enough, describing the move as self-regulation and calling for the internal surveillance of abattoirs to be enforced by law.
The industry marking its own homework is just not going to cut it here. We need to have real transparency, and that is allowing state and federal regulators access to the footage to monitor compliance.
RSPCA Australia also encourages CCTV to be a mandated minimum animal welfare requirement across Australia in all establishments.
Members of the Australian Meat Industry Council will install surveillance cameras by 2026. Mahnoz Anguri, SBS World News.
Australia's cricketers have beaten New Zealand in Christchurch to complete a 2-0 sweep of their Test series. After more than 3 decades, the Black Caps are still waiting for a home win over the Aussies when history had been beckoning.
You have to go back to 1993 for New Zealand's last Test victory on home soil against Australia. And the long wait continues after the Black Caps squandered a strong position on day 4 of the second Test. Australia's overnight score of 4 for 77 soon became 5 for 80 when Travis Head was out-caught. However, that was as good as it got for the home team. Mitchell Marsh and Alex Carey put on a 140-run partnership to take the game away from New Zealand. There was a stumble when Marsh was dismissed. LBW and Mitchell Starc was out from the very next ball. But captain Pat Cummins hit 32 confident runs to see his side home.
Pat Cummins hits the winning runs.
It ends a hectic spell of 22 tests in 15 months for Australia. They only lost 5 of them. Achola Rock, SBS World News.
The Premier League title race is tighter than ever after a pulsating 1-1 draw between Liverpool and Manchester City. It means that Arsenal remains top of the table on goal difference, but only 1 point separates the 3 teams. Lower down, Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham secured a crucial win over 4th placed Aston Villa.
Anfield in full voice for a titanic showdown between English football's 2 most dominant clubs. Over the last 6 seasons, Liverpool is the only team to have interrupted Manchester City's run of titles. There is rivalry and respect between managers Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola, who embraced before their last Premier League contest. Liverpool equalising after the break from the penalty spot.
McAllister makes no mistake.
Which really showed, okay, if you can play football like this against Man City, that's a statement. And I love that. You get a point for it, fine, keep going.
Behind the 3-horse title race, there is a tussle for the 4th and final Champions League qualifying place, and Tottenham's hopes of earning it were boosted with victory at Aston Villa, and they will go above Villa in the table if they win their game in hand. Alex Thomas, SBS World News.
Australia's Alex de Minaur is into the last 16 at Indian Wells, one of the most prestigious events outside the Grand Slams. He needed less than an hour and a half to beat Alexander Bublik in straight sets. De Minaur now faces world number 6 Alexander Zverev for a place in the quarterfinals, and the winner of that match is in line to play defending champion Carlos Alcaraz. American Bailey Tardy is finally an LPGA winner, her first title coming in her 2nd season on tour after years of failing to qualify. Bailey almost quit because she was making so little money before earning almost $500,000 at Blue Bay in China. Australia's Minjee Lee tied for 4th place. And Aussie Cameron Smith has missed out on more than $3 million at Live Golf Hong Kong. He joined Abraham Answer and Paul Casey on 13 under par after 3 rounds. But it was Answer who won the playoff to more than double his money and lift an individual Live title for the first time ever. Coming up, the weather details and the first picture of the Princess of Wales since her hospital stay. But why is it causing controversy? To the weather forecast now, and a monsoon and low should maintain rain and storms across the north. Abundant tropical moisture should maintain flooding rain in eastern Western Australia. Moist easterly winds should maintain showers over eastern Queensland and north-eastern parts of New South Wales. To the major centres now, the sun will be out in Sydney, partly cloudy skies in Canberra, an early change and then cloudy skies for Melbourne. Overcast too for Hobart, Adelaide and Perth. Some showers ahead for Darwin and a possible shower to hit Brisbane. Looking at conditions further afield now, thunderstorms ahead for Nundy, drizzle in Noumea, windy in Wellington, a few showers ahead for Auckland. To Southeast Asia now, the sun will shine in Bangkok, partly cloudy in Kuala Lumpur, clear skies above Singapore and drizzle in Jakarta. Further north now, and a fine day ahead for Beijing. Rain in Seoul and Tokyo, mostly sunny skies in Shanghai and Hong Kong, and partly cloudy in Hanoi. To the west we go, and clear skies across Beirut, Jerusalem and Baghdad, partly cloudy in Islamabad. Sunny with a top of 35 degrees for Mumbai. To Europe now, cloudy skies for Stockholm and Berlin, some rain to hit London, snowfall in Kiev, a fine day ahead for Madrid, showers in Istanbul. To Africa now, cloudy skies ahead for Casablanca, mostly sunny in Cairo, thunderstorms in Lagos, a few showers in Nairobi, clear and fine in Johannesburg. To South America now, cloudy and grey across Caracas, Bogotá and Lima. A few showers to hit La Paz, rain ahead for Rio and thunderstorms in Buenos Aires. And for North America, showers and wet weather in Vancouver, partly cloudy in San Francisco, should be mostly sunny in Miami, a few showers in Havana and partly cloudy in Mexico City. The first image of the Princess of Wales since abdominal surgery in January has been released by Kensington Palace, but within hours the image caused controversy over concerns that it was manipulated.
A family photo in Windsor taken by Prince William for Mother's Day. The picture posted online by Kensington Palace in hopes of calming rumours about Catherine's health, with a message from the princess herself: "Thank you for your kind wishes and continued support over the last 2 months." Catherine has been absent from public life since Christmas Day.
Thank you so much. That's very sweet of you to come and say hello to us. Yeah.
The new image now the centre of more speculations, with multiple photo agencies including Reuters and the Associated Press issuing a kill notice saying the photo didn't align with the editorial standards, or pointing to inconsistency in the alignment of Princess Charlotte's left hand. Some also wondering why Catherine isn't wearing her wedding or engagement rings, creating room for many more questions yet to be answered by the palace. First and foremost, is the princess doing as well as the palace claims?
We've been told that she is doing well, but we haven't seen her and we haven't had any updates. This, in a way, is an update. If the photo has been manipulated, then that message is muddied, of course.
News agencies say the photo was manipulated at source, raising concerns about the royal family's transparency.
I think in this new world order, they're trying to create an aura of transparency. And if they're doing that, they've got to be transparent about this too.
King Charles has also been largely out of the public eye since January after a cancer diagnosis, but the palace more forthcoming about his health situation. A recorded speech by the king expected to be released shortly to mark Commonwealth Day. Madina Jafari, SBS World News.
Recapping our top stories now, and Israel's deadline for hostage releases expired with Ramadan now beginning. Israel had threatened a ground offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah unless a deal was reached with Hamas. Ukraine has rejected a call by Pope Francis for the country to negotiate an end to the war with Russia, the pontiff calling on Kyiv to have the courage to raise the white flag. The Vatican saying the Pope was referring to negotiation, not capitulation. Relief is on the way for millions of residents sweating through a heatwave in south and eastern parts of the country. A cool change will begin to sweep through Victoria tomorrow, but South Australia will have to wait until Wednesday evening. And And Torres Strait Islanders are calling for governments to bolster frontline services over concerns that illegal activities between Australia and Papua New Guinea are increasing. That is the world this Monday. If you missed any of tonight's bulletin, you can catch up on SBS On Demand, and for the top stories, head to the SBS News website. Rochelle Harrison-Pless will be back with our next bulletin that's set at 10:15 tonight. Till then, from the World News team, good night.